The acrid stench of ammonia clinging to the thin hospital sheets was the first jolt. My eyes fluttered open, not to the familiar muted tones of my Tokyo apartment, but to a stark, unwelcoming room. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that echoed the frantic pounding in my chest. Where am I? Confused, I tried to sit up, but a wave of nausea forced me back down. As my gaze drifted to a faded, peeling wall, a name, scrawled in an old calendar hanging crookedly, jumped out at me. Elise Vance. Elise Vance. My world tilted. The name ripped through my consciousness like a forgotten, yet utterly devastating prophecy. Elise Vance, the villainess, the tragic, pathetic, broken villainess who died alone, impoverished, and scorned after a lifelong futile battle against the beloved fake heiress, Selina Thorne. A dizzying torrent of memories, both mine and hers, crashed through me. I was Dr. Arisawa Ken, a highly accomplished quantum physicist and venture capitalist in my previous life, a man who built a multi-billion-dollar empire from scratch before a freak lab accident claimed me. Now, I was Elise Vance, a young woman barely out of her teens, in a world that felt both familiar and terrifyingly fictional. This was unexpected. Looking at the meager closet that owned all my possessions, I put on the skinny jeans and shirt and ditched the dirty, worn dress. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to make sense of the overwhelming influx of information. The novel was a popular webtoon in my old world, a dramatic saga titled Selina's Grand Romance, which I had passively followed during my rare breaks. Every person has to indulge in something trivial, right? It depicted the glorious rise of Selina Thorne, the supposed heiress of Thorne Industries, and the ignominious downfall of Elise Vance, who was secretly the true heir. Switched at birth, Elise was raised in poverty by the Vances, a family more concerned with gambling debts and their next drink than their adopted daughter. Meanwhile, Selina was lavished with love, luxury, and the affection of the Thorne patriarch and matriarch, who, in the story, were portrayed as doting, but ultimately blind to Selina's subtle manipulations. Elise, fueled by a nascent, ill-understood sense of injustice, repeatedly tried to expose Selina, only to be dismissed as delusional, greedy, and unstable. Every attempt backfired, pushing her further into isolation, poverty, and, eventually, madness. The culmination? A catastrophic confrontation where Elise, desperate and cornered, lashed out, only to be painted as a deranged villain by Selina and her adoring parents. She died, broken, alone, and penniless, while Selina reigned supreme, marrying the charismatic male lead and securing her position. My internal monologue was sharp, cutting through the haze of Elise's pain and ruthlessly eliminating any sentimentality that lingered in her shadow. This was unacceptable. That novel's ending was not my fate. I, Arisawa Ken, who had navigated the cutthroat world of global finance and pushed the boundaries of theoretical physics, would not be reduced to a side character in a vapid romance, let alone a tragic villainess. The Elise Vance I inhabited was currently around 18 years old. From the memories, I deduced that I had transmigrated several years before the plot of Selina's Grand Romance truly kicked off. This was crucial. This was my window. The original Elise had no resources, no education beyond basic schooling, and a severely flawed understanding of how the world worked. But I did. I had a mind honed by decades of intense intellectual pursuit, a comprehensive understanding of macroeconomic trends, burgeoning technological sectors, and, most importantly, the entire plotline at my disposal. My expertise in my previous life was in rapidly scaling tech startups and making astute, forward-thinking investments. I knew which companies were poised to explode, which economic bubbles were forming, and how to maneuver capital with surgical precision. This wasn't some fantasy world with magic. It was a parallel Earth, albeit one where the social dynamics of the novel were disturbingly real. The financial markets, the technological advancements, they mirrored my old world closely enough for my knowledge to be incredibly potent. The only difference was that I, Dr. Arasawa Ken, was now young, though the gender swap was negligible. First, resources. The original Elise Vance had nothing. Her parents were dissolute, having squandered what little inheritance they received on various failed schemes. Her current account held a paltry few $100s, hidden away in online profiles, presumably against the wishes of her adoptive family. This wouldn't do. I needed capital, and I needed it fast. I quickly assessed Elise's current situation. Physically weak, emotionally battered, but fundamentally healthy. The hospital stay was due to a minor accident, a drunken shove from her father that sent her tumbling down a short flight of stairs. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to give me this blessed, albeit painful, moment of transference. Wherever she ended up, dead or alive, was no longer a concern of mine. The next few days were a blur of meticulous planning, done from a cheap motel room after I discharged myself, citing an urgent need to get back to work. The nurses looked at me with pity. They knew the Vance family and how they treated their daughter. My first move was to leverage Elise's almost non-existent digital footprint. My physical appearance, now Elise's, was unremarkable plain features, dark hair, tired eyes, perfect for operating under the radar. The genius of Arisawa Ken, however, remained intact. I used what little money Elise had to buy a cheap, second-hand laptop and a burner phone. With my knowledge of future economic trends from my previous life, I knew precisely which niche markets were about to explode. I remembered a particular cryptocurrency, obscure at this point, that would skyrocket within the next 2 years. It was a risky strategy, but Elise had nothing to lose, and I had everything to gain. I poured every penny I had into it, creating multiple anonymous accounts, a skill I'd honed in my VC days, where discretion was often paramount. To further diversify and gain more immediate capital, I turned to the stock market. Not for long-term investments yet, but for day trading based on my foreknowledge of quarterly reports and market sentiment. I remembered specific companies that would announce surprising acquisitions or breakthroughs, causing their stock to surge briefly. It was tedious, demanding, and required lightning-fast reflexes. But it worked. Within 3 months, my few $100s had blossomed into a modest but respectable sum of $20,000. This was still a pittance for building an empire, but it was enough for the next critical step: education. The original Elise had been forced to drop out of high school. I needed credentials. I enrolled in advanced online courses, quickly acing them with my prior knowledge, earning diplomas in finance, data analytics, and business administration within a year. The rapid accreditation raised a few eyebrows, but online institutions often prioritize results over traditional timelines. They had no proof, and after viewing a plain girl with a poor background with a hungry, ready to prove herself to the world, glint in her eyes said it all to the ones who did look. I used my growing funds to pay for expedited certifications, bypassing slow bureaucratic processes. While studying, I continued to invest, moving from speculative short-term plays to mid-term investments in nascent AI startups that I knew would become industry giants. I didn't just invest, I subtly advised from the shadows, offering unsolicited but uncannily accurate predictions and suggestions through anonymous channels, gaining the trust and respect of a few visionary founders. My online alias, AK became a whispered legend in the startup circuit, an elusive genius who could predict market shifts with chilling accuracy. Building an empire wasn't just about money, it was about influence, information, and a network. I started discreetly gathering data on Thorn Industries, As the true heiress, albeit unknowingly, Elise had a primal connection to it. My previous life's experiences taught me that knowledge was power. I delved into their financial reports, their market strategies, their key personnel, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. I discovered that while Thorn Industries was a powerhouse, it was also somewhat stagnant, relying on past glories and a staid management. Selina, in the original plot, eventually modernized it, but only after much strife. My focus wasn't just on Thorn Industries, though. I needed a legitimate front, a powerful entity that could execute my plan. I founded Ether Holdings, a private equity firm. Its initial capital came from my successful investments. I hired a small team of brilliant but unconventional analysts and strategists, people who were overlooked by traditional firms, but possessed raw talent and an insatiable hunger for success. They were loyal because I paid them exceptionally well, and more importantly, because I saw their potential and allowed them to flourish. The result? Ether Holdings grew exponentially. My foresight in renewable energy, sustainable tech, and advanced AI systems meant we consistently picked winners. We bought struggling companies with untapped potential, injected capital and my strategic vision, and transformed them into market leaders. My decisions were swift, cold, and calculating. I didn't waste time. This wasn't the slow burn of my previous corporate life. This was a sprint, a race against a predefined tragic future. As the years passed 2, then 3, I watched the global stage from my increasingly opulent yet discreet headquarters. The plot of Selina's grand romance was like a distant, approaching storm I was preparing for. I knew the approximate time Selina Thorne would make her grand entrance into Thorn Industries, fresh out of her elite university, poised to take over the reins. That was the point where the original Elise's misery truly began. I intended to intercept it and quash it at its roots. One evening, staring at the complex financial models on my triple monitors, I saw it, the perfect convergence. Thorn Industries was making a significant investment in a new, unproven energy sector, one I knew would fail spectacularly due to an unavoidable technological flaw that wouldn't be discovered for another year. This was their Achilles heel, their massive misstep. It would be a significant drain on their reserves, weakening them just enough for a strategic strike. My plan solidified. I would execute a hostile takeover, not a slow, gradual acquisition of shares, but a sudden, decisive move that would leave them no room to react. I wanted to walk in as the owner, not as a long-lost daughter begging for recognition. The specific target was Thorn Industries' publicly traded component, Thorn Solutions, a subsidiary that handled their tech and R&D. It was intricately linked to the main holding company, and acquiring it would give me immense leverage over the core business. The challenge wasn't just acquiring the shares. It was doing it without alerting the market or the Thorn family. I leveraged Ether Holdings' vast network and capital, utilizing shell corporations and complex financial instruments to quietly accumulate a significant stake in Thorn Solutions. My team worked tirelessly, executing my precise, almost surgical instructions. I orchestrated a series of controlled market fluctuations, a symphony of minor economic ripples that diverted attention and created opportunities to buy low. My knowledge of future geopolitics and commodity prices allowed me to anticipate market movements that others dismissed as anomalies. When a small-scale trade war erupted between two minor nations, I knew it would cause a temporary dip in the global tech supply chain, impacting Thorn Solutions. While others panicked and sold, I bought, aggressively. It took another year of relentless work, but finally the moment arrived. I had amassed enough shares to become the majority stakeholder in Thorn Solutions. The final push was a tender offer, strategically timed, leveraging the very public debacle of Thorn Industries' failing energy project. The news of the failed investment had just broken, sending their stock tumbling and creating the perfect opening for Ether Holdings to swoop in with a seemingly benevolent, but ultimately predatory, acquisition bid. I remember that day with chilling clarity. My small team, exhausted but exhilarated, watched as the final numbers came in. The board of Thorn Solutions, caught completely off guard, had no choice but to accept Ether Holdings' offer. We owned them, and through Thorn Solutions, I now held significant sway over the entirety of Thorn Industries. The news hit the financial world like a supernova. Ether Holdings, the quiet giant, had devoured a legacy corporation. Analysts scrambled to understand how a relatively young firm, headed by the elusive AK, had pulled off such a coup. Photographs of me, meticulously staged and filtered to be professional yet enigmatic, circulated across business publications, a shadowy face that no one could have ever predicted would be there. Elise Vance, now publicly known as Elise Arasawa, the founding visionary of Ether Holdings. I had legally changed my name to reflect both my new identity and my old one, a silent nod to who I truly was and to my new life. My final objective in this phase was within reach. It was time to confront the Thorn family, my real family, not as the desperate Elise Vance, but as the powerful Elise Arasawa, the woman who now owned a significant portion of their empire. The day I decided to march into the Thorn Industries headquarters was carefully chosen. It coincided with the biggest annual board meeting, where Selina Thorn, now a sharp and ambitious young woman, was expected to present a critical expansion plan. The drama of the original plot was about to unfold, but with a drastically different protagonist. I dressed in a custom-tailored power suit, its lines sharp and unforgiving. Throughout the years, I had never gotten used to wearing dresses. My hair, once neglected, was styled impeccably. My face, no longer tired and drawn, carried the subtle strength of someone who commanded billions. I still looked like Elise Vance, but an Elise Vance forged in the fires of ambition and intellect, unrecognizable from the pitiful girl who had entered the hospital years ago. My security detail, a discreet but highly effective team, escorted me to the monolithic Thorn Industries building. The lobby was a symphony of polished marble and hushed luxury, a stark contrast to the grimy streets Elise Vance grew up on and the startup shoebox offices I invested in. The receptionists, typically haughty, recognized my face from the recent financial news and stared with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "I have an appointment," I stated, my voice calm and authoritative, "with Mr. and Mrs. Thorn and Miss Selina Thorn. Please inform them that Elise Arasawa is here regarding the Thorn Solutions acquisition." The message caused a ripple of panic. Internal phone lines were ringing off their hooks, and not a single receptionist was sitting down. Moments later, I was ushered into a lavish, oak-panelled waiting area near the boardroom. I could hear muffled voices from inside, agitated, angry. Good? The chaos had begun. Finally, the grand doors swung open. Out stepped Robert Thorn and Eleanor Thorn, the parents who had unconsciously stolen my life, followed by Selina, whose face was a mask of cold fury. Robert Thorn, still a picture of dignified wealth, but with a new edge of desperation in his eyes, spoke first. "Miss Arasawa, this is highly inappropriate. The acquisition of Thorn Solutions is a complex matter, not something to be discussed in the common areas." He tried to sound commanding, but his voice wavered. Eleanor Thorn, elegant but visibly shaken, looked at me with a bewildering mix of curiosity and disdain. She didn't recognize me, of course. For her, Elise Vance was just a phantom, a name in a file somewhere. Selina Thorn, however, fixed me with a piercing gaze, annoyance etched on her flawless features. Her eyes held the subtle calculation I remembered from the webtoon, the cunning that allowed her to present herself as the benevolent angel while subtly undermining Elise. She was beautiful, poised, and utterly unprepared for me. "Miss Arasawa," Miss Thorne began, her voice smooth, attempting to regain control. "We appreciate your interest, but as the future CEO of Thorne Industries, I assure you this hostile takeover will not stand. Thorne Solutions is integral to our long-term strategy." I smiled, a slow, predatory curve of my lips that wasn't warm, but packed with lethal intent. "Miss Thorne," I replied, my voice a silken steel, cutting through the feigned cordiality, "I'm not here to discuss the acquisition, but to inform you. The acquisition is complete. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Ether Holdings holds the majority shares in Thorne Solutions. Your board's acceptance letter was signed an hour ago." Silence. A profound, suffocating silence descended. Robert and Eleanor Thorne gaped, their faces draining of colour. Selina's perfectly sculpted expression fractured, revealing pure, unadulterated shock. "Impossible!" Robert Thorne finally managed, his voice raspy. "We explicitly rejected your initial offer, Miss Arasawa. Our lawyers confirmed no further action could be taken without proper due diligence and our consent." "That was your public rejection, Mr. Thorne," I countered, stepping closer, my presence filling the space, "while your legal team was busy trying to fend off my publicly known tender offer. My team, using a completely legitimate and discreet network of proxies, was quietly acquiring shares through open market purchases for the better part of a year. And, as you know, with the recent collapse of your energy projects, many shareholders were quite eager to divest. Thorne Solutions stock was significantly undervalued, a perfect opportunity for a firm like Ether. My final tender offer was merely a formality." Selina, recovering her composure, attempted to interject. "But you can't just—" "I don't have to be formal." I cut her off, my gaze locking onto her. "I can, and I did. Furthermore, let me clarify something. I'm not here to negotiate, I'm here to inform you. Thorne Industries, as a whole, is deeply reliant on Thorne Solutions. Its technology, its patents, its intellectual property, they're now mine. And, by extension, so is a significant portion of your future." Robert Thorne looked like he was about to have a stroke. Eleanor was clutching her pearls, her eyes wide with bewildered horror. "Now," I continued, my voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying immense weight, "I understand you have a board meeting today to discuss future expansion. I believe I have something far more pertinent to discuss." I pulled out a thick envelope from my attaché case. "This contains not just the certified transfer documents for Thorne Solutions, but also a detailed forensic audit report regarding the events surrounding the birth of your daughter, Selina Thorne, and the disappearance of your true biological heir." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Selina flinched, a flicker of fear in her eyes. The truth, the one she had unknowingly benefiting from, the one that had condemned Elise Vance to a life of misery, was finally laid bare. Robert looked at the envelope, then at me, his eyes clouded with confusion, then dawning horror. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "I'm talking about a switched at birth incident, Mr. Thorne," I stated plainly, my gaze unwavering. "Your biological daughter was replaced at the hospital. She was given to the Vance family, a family who neglected and abused her. And I am that daughter." Another stunned silence. This time it was laced with disbelief and a nascent sense of profound betrayal. Eleanor Thorne gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Selina, now pale, took a step back, her perfect facade crumbling. My name is Elise Arisoa, but my birth name was Thorne, I articulated, each word a hammer blow. The same Elise Vance you dismissed as a fantasist, a liar, a villainess in the making. The same Elise Vance whose life was systematically destroyed by the very lie your family unknowingly perpetuated, a lie that benefited your adopted daughter Selina at every turn. I laid the envelope on the mahogany table, pushing it towards Robert. Inside, you will find DNA evidence, hospital records, and a detailed investigative report confirming every word I've spoken. The nurses involved, now elderly, finally came forward after years of guilt, prompted by a substantial settlement. It took considerable resources to uncover and corroborate, resources I now command. The room pulsated with disbelief and dawning understanding. Robert Thorne finally reached for the envelope, his hands trembling as he pulled out the documents. As he scanned the top page, his face grew ashen. Eleanor, peering over his shoulder, let out a choked sob. Selina, watching them, tears welling in her eyes, finally burst out, "This is an outrage, a desperate scheme. She's trying to steal my life, my family, my inheritance." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, pure indignation. I merely arched an eyebrow. "Stolen, Selina? You mean reclaiming what was unjustly taken?" My voice held no warmth, only the cold, hard edge of justice being served. "Your schemes, as you call them, are not effective against someone who knows the entire script. I knew the plot, Selina. I knew every card you would play, every sweet lie you would whisper, every manipulation you would attempt. Only this time, I'm not the weak, impoverished, uneducated Elise. I am the woman who just acquired your family's most valuable subsidiary." Robert Thorne looked up from the documents, his eyes bloodshot, fixed on me. There was something akin to terror there and profound sorrow. "Elise, you're truly our daughter," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The weight of his realization was crushing. "The evidence is conclusive, Mr. Thorne," I stated, my voice softening slightly, though my resolve remained firm. "I have spent the last 4 years building an empire, not out of greed, but out of necessity. To survive, to correct a grave injustice. Thorne Industries suffered from stagnation, from an inability to adapt to a rapidly changing global market. My company, Ether Holdings, is here to prevent its complete collapse, regardless of, or perhaps because of, the truth." I leaned in, my gaze encompassing all three of them. "My intent is not to destroy. It is to unite, but on my terms. Thorne Industries will be restructured. Ether Holdings will integrate Thorne Solutions assets, and I will assume a leading role in the overall management. Your company will not die broken, poor, and alone, but it will change, and so will your lives." Selina, tears streaming down her face, looked utterly lost. Her years of carefully constructed influence, her perceived birthright, shattered by a woman she had never even known. A woman who had, by all accounts, risen from nothing to conquer her world. The irony was palpable. The villainess, as she was supposed to be, had taken center stage not through desperate schemes, but through sheer intellect and calculated power. Eleanor Thorne, tears flowing freely, took a hesitant step towards me. "My daughter, all these years," she murmured, her voice laced with regret and shock. I didn't offer comfort. Not yet. The wounds Elise Vance had carried ran too deep. "I understand this is a lot to process," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I'm not asking for your immediate acceptance, but I am demanding your cooperation, for the sake of Thorne Industries and for the sake of setting right a lifetime of wrongs." I glanced at Selina, who stood frozen, her future irrevocably altered. "As for Miss Selina Thorne, her future role within this restructured corporation will be re-evaluated. Her contributions or lack thereof will be assessed objectively. The implied threat was clear. Her scheming days were over. Stepping back, I surveyed them. The wealthy, powerful family now reeling from a truth they never saw coming. The dark fate that awaited Elise Vance had been expertly sidestepped, utterly obliterated by a genius transmigrator who saw a story's ending and rewrote it with an iron fist and an even sharper mind. My empire was built, my real family was confronted, and the reign of the fake heiress was at an end. This was just the beginning of my new chapter, and it would be written entirely on my terms. Years later, my name, Elise Arsawa, was synonymous with disruptive innovation and unparalleled financial acumen. Ether Holdings, now deeply intertwined with the revitalized Thorn Industries, had grown into a behemoth, dictating market trends and pioneering advancements in sustainable technologies and AI. True to my word, I had not destroyed Thorn Industries. I had rebuilt it, brick by painstaking brick, into a gleaming, forward-thinking empire that far surpassed its former glory. My vision, initially met with skepticism, had proven prophetic, delivering unprecedented profits and securing its position as a global leader. Robert Thorn, humbled and aged significantly by the revelations, had retired from active management, though he remained on the board in an advisory capacity. The initial shock had given way to a profound, albeit complicated, respect for his biological daughter, me. He spent his days dedicated to various philanthropic endeavors, a quiet penance for years of blindness. Then took up fishing. I was happy to leave him be. Eleanor Thorne, after a prolonged period of grief and guilt, eventually found a fragile peace in reconnecting with me, a relationship built slowly and deliberately, devoid of the sentimental platitudes of a typical mother-daughter bond, but nevertheless present. She marveled at my brilliance, a stark reminder of the potential she had unknowingly allowed to be squandered, but she would never know who I really was. Selina Thorne's fall from grace was swift and absolute. Stripped of her assumed inheritance and influence, her attempts to leverage her social connections and charm proved futile against my unassailable power and the damning evidence of the switched-at-birth scandal. She was given a minor, non-executive role in a distant subsidiary, a gilded cage designed to pacify her and keep her far from any real, decision-making power to have her grand romance in. Her attempts to launch rival ventures invariably collapsed, undermined by her own lack of true business acumen and my subtle, pervasive influence. That charismatic male lead from the web novel never showed up in the end. I heard that he, upon realizing Selina's true nature and lack of substantial assets, quietly faded from her life, drawn instead to new, equally ambitious prospects. I, Elise Arsawa, however, stood unburdened by such emotional entanglements. The world of romance, even the fabricated one from the webtoon, held no appeal. My focus remained singular: progress, power, and the meticulous crafting of a legacy entirely my own. I oversaw my vast empire from a penthouse office in a gleaming skyscraper, a silent sentinel watching over the city that was once my private battlefield. The plain features of Elise Vance had matured into a striking, almost intimidating beauty, my eyes holding the sharp, unyielding intelligence of Arasawa Ken. I would often reflect on the journey, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. The initial shock of the gender swap had become a distant memory, a minor oddity in the grand scheme of my transmigration. What mattered was the mind, the strategic intellect that had transcended physical form and societal expectations. I had taken a broken life, a predetermined tragic narrative, and ruthlessly, brilliantly rewritten every single chapter. The acrid stench of ammonia from that hospital room felt a lifetime away. Now the scent was of polished steel, rich leather, and the intoxicating aroma of undeniable success. I was Dr. Arasawa Ken, reborn as Elise Arasawa, the true heiress, the visionary, the architect of my own destiny. The villainess was dead, replaced by an empress who ruled not with malice, but with an iron will and unparalleled genius. My empire was secured, my future unwritten by anyone but myself. And for Elise Arasawa, that was the ultimate victory.